Welcome back to the Razzball YouTube channel. I am Donkey Teeth, joined again by Pat Fitzmaurice of the Football Girl to continue our conversation about our 2021 Dynasty rankings. If you didn't catch it on the last show, we discussed my rankings number 1 through 10, or my rankings at that time, 1 through 10. Constantly in flux here with these discussions, figuring out what the best order of these guys is. So if you didn't catch that yet, go back and listen to the first show. I'll link it in the description here. And once again, I'm joined by Pat, very gracious to come on. He is one of the best rankers in the world for fantasy football. Number 1 right now over at Fantasy Pros on their in-season rankings. He was number 2 last year for the draft rankings. Pat, how you doing?
Doing great, DT. Thanks for having me. And thank you for the comments about the rankings. Clinging on to number 1 for dear life. We'll see how long that can last, but appreciate the compliment.
I believe in you. I think you got it, Pat. So as we talked about this on the first show, but just to recap, these are half-point PPR rankings for 1 QB league. And we talked a little bit about our philosophy on part 1. So if you want to go back and check that out, we have a little bit of philosophical difference as far as how we're valuing quarterbacks, tight ends, although neither of us had any tight ends in the top 20. And then, a little bit of variance on how we're valuing running backs versus wide receivers, just preference on how we like to build our dynasty squad. So I highly recommend going back and listening to part 1. And let's just dive in here, Pat, on our rankings number 11 through 20. So we left off on the last show with you having ranked CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson in your top 10. They did not quite make mine. I have CeeDee Lamb at currently number 19, and I've got Justin Jefferson at number 16. So I've got those two inverted, and I've got them a little bit further down my list. Why don't you give me your sales pitch on these two?
For Lamb, I mean, it's just been seeing is believing, man. Whether it was his career at Oklahoma, like his just absolute destruction of Texas in the Red River rivalry game, his last year there, the amazing catch he made at the NFL Combine in one-on-one drills on like a fade pattern, where it was like one of the most acrobatic things I've ever seen. Some of the catches he's made this year, that touchdown catch he had the other day for the Cowboys, where he, falling on his back and like high points the ball and then catches it as he's coming down about to land on his back. Like, he is just so good. And to me, even though he has encountered some adverse situations this year, the Dak Prescott injury, the decimation of the Cowboys offensive line, the target competition with having to share targets with two, really good players, maybe a great one in Amari Cooper and a very good young receiver in Michael Gallup. And Lamb is currently still in the top 25, just barely at wide receiver in half-point PPR. I think he's exactly 25. But, I think this is going to be like the worst his situation ever gets in his NFL career. I think eventually he's going to be an alpha receiver for whichever team he's on. I don't know if he's going to be with Dak Prescott. I'm not too worried about the quarterback here. Like, I think he's just going to be great wherever he goes. And he's going to be great for a long, long time because he's about to turn 22. To me, he is absolutely a foundational piece in Dynasty.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue with anything you've said. Devalue him if you want, and maybe that's mentally what I did for the Dak injury. But Dak is probably going to end up being there long term in Dallas. Would that be your guess?
Yeah, like you're fair to raise that as a potential issue since Dak is unsigned for next year. We don't know what they're going to have at quarterback. I'm assuming it won't be Andy Dalton, but we can never tell about these things. Like, Dak's going to be expensive even after that gruesome injury. So the quarterback thing is something you always have to like carry in the back of your mind and look at to some degree with the assessment of dynasty wide receivers. But I just feel like Lamb is such a remarkable talent. I'm not going to let quarterback concerns scare me away from him.
Sure. And then Justin Jefferson, who I had a little bit higher than Lamb, and actually I did hem and haw on them. So the gap between 16 and 19 for me that I've got them currently here is really minuscule to me. And I know you've got him at 7 to 10. Is it a pretty small gap for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big one. Like, I'm a little more, to me, like Lamb kind of pops to me a little bit more. But boy, Jefferson, like for a guy that I was not entirely sold on coming out of LSU, like, is he just it was always sort of hard to figure out with the components of that LSU offense, like, you know, who's the talented one here? Is it Joe Burrow? Is it Joe Brady designing the offense? Is it the wide receivers? Is it, like, I think we've learned that it was a sort of a group effort. Yeah, and Jefferson, I mean, my God, the numbers he put up in 2019 at LSU. I was also worried that he was maybe just like kind of a slot specialist. He's not. He can be a slot guy. He can be outside. Just a pretty remarkable talent, and I think I didn't realize that to the degree that I should have. To me, he probably should have been. We're going to look back at the ordering of the way the wide receivers were taken in the 2019 draft for a long time, with Ruggs going first. I kind of think now it pretty clearly should have been Lamb and then Jefferson. Not to totally diss Jerry Jeudy, but these two guys are pretty special.
Well, yeah, and I mean, a little bit of a tangent here, but you're going to look back at last year's too, with DK Metcalf going at the late second round.
Yes. I mean, behind JJ Arcega-Whiteside. I mean, just.
Yeah, and I mean, Hollywood Brown is not, these guys are still young, but Arcega-Whiteside, we can pretty confidently start to write him off as a bust, I think.
Yeah, I think we've reached that point.
So yes, I can't argue. The reason on show one that I said this feels like a fool's errand is because, I mean, you could give me these guys in so many different orders and I would not have an issue with it,
Sure. Yeah. Like after about 6 or 7 for me, maybe even 8, like really any of these guys. I mean, you could order Dynasty rankings so many different ways. And, I kind of would invite anyone in this show, especially in a Dynasty league, put together your top 20, walk away from it and go back to it 4 hours later and tell me if you're totally good with it or, thinking about making changes. Like, I think you're going to be thinking about changes because it is such a subjective exercise.
Yeah. And, when people read these, there's always this initial shock factor. Like, what? This guy's there? But the more you think about this stuff, the more you realize that there is no right or wrong. I mean, one of the guys last year that I got the most, other than Carry-On, who I was absolutely wrong about, the 2 other guys that people took the biggest issue with was my ranking of Joe Mixon. I had him down at 26, just never been a huge Joe Mixon fan. And Juju Smith-Schuster, I had at 50. And people thought those were outrageous. Maybe they were at the time, but not looking too stupid right now on those.
No, I would have pushed back on Juju at the time. And, I was totally wrong. I think I took Juju in a startup a couple of years ago, like 6th or 7th or something like that overall in the first round. And obviously it's not looking very good right now. I mean, Dynasty values are so fragile. It's amazing how they can just, change in the blink of an eye.
And in 2 weeks, this list would look different for me. I promise you, there would be several different people in this top 20. All right. So good points there, Pat. I do think I probably end up moving both of those guys up. You make a lot of sense. And, for my philosophy, it doesn't make sense for me to have them devalued like this below some of these running backs. When you look at my top 10 and, I'm valuing Tyreek Hill where I am, and I had Michael Thomas up there. I think I'm going to drop him down into the top 20 here. But guys like that, if I'm ranking them ahead of Saquon, which I did, and right there with Dalvin Cook, then these really young talents probably should be a little bit higher for me. So I had originally here Patrick Mahomes at number 11. We already had this conversation on show number 1. Philosophically, you're not a dynasty quarterback guy. He just missed out on your top 20, correct?
Yeah, he would have been like I thought about putting him in into the 20th slot. Like when I was sort of putting together the honorable mention, he was at the top of that list.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, for me, my experience in dynasty leagues is that once you get to year 2, 3, more 3, 4, 5, the leagues become top heavy. People start rebuilding, shipping off their older talent to those top teams, and all of the talent consolidates on these couple rosters. And the difference ends up being who's got Patrick Mahomes, who's got Travis Kelce winning the championship. So you do still need those running backs.
Sure.
And honestly, in a startup, it would be tough for me to take Mahomes over, these receivers that we're talking about. When you put me to task and ask me, would you rather have CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson than Mahomes if you're drafting today? I probably do end up taking the receiver. The other part of the reason that I value quarterbacks, it seems a little bit more than you, is that philosophy. I look at my roster almost like a portfolio of investments. And we talked about with wide receivers that there's such stable assets, and they're going to be there. They're going to be a rock for you for the next 10 years, you hope, versus the running backs with the turnover. So the same thing with quarterback, even more so. I mean, we see quarterbacks play at a high level into their mid to late 30s.
Yeah, I mean, he is that piece in your portfolio. Like any successful portfolio of investments, I guess, needs the growth, the high upside stocks, and then also just a couple like rock solid, steady performers that are the low floor, the ones that aren't going to lose value. And Mahomes is the guy, like the rock. He's just going to be just this cornerstone whose value is not going to deteriorate anytime soon. And there is a peace of mind in having that set it and forget it guy at those onesie positions, quarterback and tight end. And Mahomes is clearly a guy who you're never going to have to think about. Matchup proof. Like we weren't worried about him against the Buccaneers, one of the better defenses in the league, and he absolutely torched them last week. So hard for me to argue that. We might fundamentally differ a little bit on just the fungibility of the position. Probably not too much, though. It's certainly no diss on Mahomes. It's a guy you're pretty happy with if he's on your dynasty roster.
Yeah, absolutely. So number 12 here, I've got Josh Jacobs. He's an interesting one. I don't think he's the most talented running back. I don't even think that he's in that group of top 5 most talented running backs, but the system is so good. And they lean on him so heavily. But actually, they've been going a little bit more than Jacobs owners would like to Devontae Booker this year. But still, on the flip side, Jacobs is only 22 years old. So where did you have him ranked, and what are your thoughts on Josh Jacobs?
I've got him 18, and I agree with you. I mean, it's funny that the one concern about him coming into the draft last year, more so with him than some of the other top backs in that class, was that he had been in this committee, this 3-way committee at Alabama with Damian Harris and Najee Harris. And then Jacobs has been just shown the capacity to be this tremendous workhorse if they want him to be. And maybe, I don't know, if you're in a dynasty league, maybe you do kind of almost like to see someone like Devontae Booker coming in and spelling him a little bit just to, not totally burn him out. But we were worried about maybe whether he was going to be fully utilized as a pass catcher, especially when the Raiders had Jalen Richard on the roster. They had, why am I blanking on the name of the ex-Detroit Lion third down back guy? Whatever. So he was on the roster, didn't make it. And like that hasn't been a big part of Josh Jacobs' game. He's not Alvin Kamara by any means, but he can catch passes. He's versatile. He's tough. He can carry a full load. And like you said, I mean, he is so important to that system. And John Gruden seems to absolutely love the guy and love giving him the ball as much as possible.
Theo Riddick was the guy you were looking for.
Thank you. That would have bothered me. For some reason, a Joik Bell kept popping into my head, and I couldn't get it out.
DeAndre Washington was the one that was popping into my head. Again, I'm with you on all of that. The concerns were workload in college. Like, can this guy hold up to a full workload? And last year we saw him wear down at the end of the year. So maybe that is kind of what it is. They're feeling pretty good about their playoff chances right now in Vegas. Just kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit and make sure your stud running back is healthy for the playoffs kind of thing. Yeah, I think we're pretty much in the same area on Jacobs. I don't think there's a whole lot of discussion there. I had Barkley at number 13. Again, I think I'm going to move him into my top 10 once these finally get published. We discussed Saquon a little bit more at length in the 1 through 10 version, the part 1 of the show. And then Miles Sanders. Man, I love Miles Sanders. I'm a huge Miles Sanders fan. I had him in my top 10 originally. And then it just goes to show you how much of an impact just watching one game can make these rankings fluctuate. But God, Doug Peterson, I mean, he gave him 8 touches last night in last night's game against the Seahawks. It's concerning. It's concerning. That offense is concerning. He's so talented. I don't know what they're thinking with how they're using Miles Sanders. And maybe I need to move him down a little bit lower. Where did you have him?
So I've got him 20th. And yeah, I mean, I've been a big proponent of Miles Sanders. This is probably as low as I've had him since, anytime last year. But like you said, like the concerns about the ecosystem in Philadelphia, that Wentz isn't the right quarterback. Like, I know the offensive line is going to get healthier. But man, like that offense just looks so bad right now. Hard to feel that good about any part of it, but I like him too. I mean, 23, very versatile. I love that he last year, and this was kind of my hope for Jonathan Taylor this year, when Taylor did not look very good in the first 7 weeks, maybe more than that. I guess you could argue that he hasn't really looked that great right up until the Green Bay game. But Sanders was struggling in the running game early in his rookie year, but he was like more than making up for it in the passing game and running routes further downfield than most backs, and just really being such a good pass catching back. And then later in the second half of the season, like he started to get it as a runner and be really effective as a runner. And so you kind of had the total package by the end of the season. This year, the early part of the year, slowed down by injuries. But yeah, like long term, I'm feeling pretty confident about him.
Yeah. You want to bet on the talent, but then you watch the game and you get spooked is kind of where I feel like I'm at right now. Like I want to believe the talent is going to win out, but the concerns are difficult to ignore at this point. Stefon Diggs, I had at number 15, and he's one that I had a little bit lower originally. When I came on your podcast, we talked about how I love Diggs coming into this year. I'm a believer in Josh Allen. I mean, it's been a phenomenal year, the best season of Diggs' career. Getting out of Minnesota seemed to be exactly what the doctor ordered. He's still only 26 years old. I know people probably think he's older than that. He seems like he's been around longer than 26-year-old. And he's locked up in Buffalo through 2023. So you got 3 more seasons there at least with Josh Allen. What was your ranking on Diggs?
19. Agree with pretty much everything you said. Like, he's proven himself to be an alpha receiver. It was always kind of hard to discern whether he was, just I don't want to say a complementary receiver, because he was always too good to be that, just such a phenomenal route runner. But having to share targets basically even with Adam Thielen in Minnesota, we didn't know if he could be that go-to guy. And like his performance in Buffalo this year has totally dispelled any doubts.
Yeah, absolutely. I had Justin Jefferson at 16. We already talked about him. Again, he's only 21 years old with CeeDee Lamb. And he's in Minnesota through 2024 as a first rounder last year. Kyler Murray, this is going to be one that obviously we disagree on. Philosophically, we disagree. I've been pretty much the highest guy around on Kyler Murray. He's come back down to earth the last 2 games, dealing with a little bit of a shoulder injury, had to go up against Belichick. this past week, which you know how Belichick is able to take things away from people when he really wants to. But he's only 23 years old. I really love Kyler Murray. I know that there was this discussion last year about Lamar Jackson and running quarterbacks and the way that they age, which is why I have this separation between Mahomes and Kyler. But, man, I think he's a special player.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I cannot argue this one too much because in the super flex dynasty startup I was telling you about in the first episode of our conversation that we had this past year, I took Kyler Murray 10th overall. And it is a super flex and everything. I was kind of worried about whether I was making the right move because I did have some concerns about just, is he going to be, I don't know, he could run, but like, what is the running going to look like in year 2 and beyond? What is the passing going to look like in year 2 and beyond? Because if you recall, he had a pretty low average depth of target last year. Like, is this just going to be this horizontal offense with Kingsbury? Yeah. And obviously like DeAndre Hopkins has helped with that tremendously. And we've seen that Kyler throws one of the best deep balls in the league. But anyway, any concerns I had were dispelled. I'm very happy I took him at number 10. I mean, as I told you, I was kind of drafting this team with the intention of playing for year 2. And, I'm 9-3, and that's with 2 losses the last couple of weeks. And those first 10 weeks, Kyler just carried my team on his back. So tremendously valuable commodity. Like when things are going right for Kyler, the way he puts up points is just kind of amazing. I mean, the combination of passing and running is just, he can absolutely carry a fantasy team.
It is. And, it's almost shocking that he's been shut down on the ground the past 2 weeks. It seemed like he was just unstoppable, how quick he gets to the edge. But once you get the film on him, these coaches and their staffs are so good at figuring out the right scheme. So cat and mouse, I think he bounces back, don't you?
I do. And it might be that, he's got this shoulder injury, this AC joint sprain or whatever it is. He could just be a little
doesn't want to take the hit.
Yeah, it could be that because like what we saw the first 10 weeks, like I think that's the true Kyler.
Yeah. And then you mentioned it. Hopkins is there through 2024 now. So you got 4 more years with one of the best wide receivers in the game. Philosophical, obviously. Where would you have Kyler in your rankings?
Let's see. So I didn't have him
outside your top 20. I know that.
Yeah, he would be outside of the top 20. And I'll be honest, he might be outside my top 40. And he probably shouldn't be. Just like, I don't know if he is, for a guy in a 1 quarterback league and a dynasty league to be like in my top 25, top 30, he's got to be just a Hall of Fame talent like Mahomes. I guess I'm not totally sold that Kyler is a Hall of Fame passer yet. Extraordinary performer. I guess I also learned kind of a hard lesson about where I had Lamar Jackson ranked last year. And make no mistake, I think Kyler is a much better passer than Lamar Jackson. But I also don't know that he is some sort of transcendent talent as a passer either. So
sure. And that's pretty much what I'm betting on, is that he ends up being a Hall of Famer with this type of ranking. You're right to have him this high.
Well within the range of outcomes for sure.
All right. So where were we at here, Pat? I had Kyler at 17, Aaron Jones at 18, your guy up in Green Bay. We know that he's a free agent here coming up this offseason. He's 25 years old, going to be 26. We talked about this on part 1 of the show. These running backs with expiring contracts, there's some risk of the unknown. And I always do devalue these guys. Seems like you actually devalued him a little bit more, huh?
Yeah, part of it is not knowing where he's going to land. Will he be in an offense that's going to give him the touchdown opportunities that Green Bay has given him? And really, although he slowed down a little with the touchdown production in the last couple of weeks, I think that's where that was the attraction, the number of touchdowns he scored last year, that he was averaging better than 1 a game early this year. One possible knock here is that like when we've seen him at his best, when either or both of Jamal Williams, his backfield mates, or Devontae Adams have been hurt. When Adams has been hurt, he has been like a big part of the passing game. When Adams is healthy, not so much. And maybe there's even room for his next team. You have to think that maybe the A.J. Dillon draft pick signals that, he won't be in Green Bay in 2021. Maybe his next team uses him as more of a Kamara-esque back where like his pass catching is highlighted. Because we don't see that as often when Devontae Adams is healthy. And, it's interesting to think that like Jones isn't being used to the full extent that he could be, but that's kind of been the case. Like, Matt LaFleur is very committed to a multi-back approach. And it's just that Jones has been so remarkably efficient with his touches the last couple of years that, the committee approach hasn't really hurt him that much.
Yeah. And Jamal Williams, since Jones has come back from the injury, has taken more of the carries for sure. Is it your expectation as, a Packers fan that Jones isn't re-signed?
I kind of think he's going to be elsewhere next year. The Dillon draft pick just sort of, to me, spelled that like they're not going to give him big money.
Makes sense. So I had CeeDee Lamb at 19, and that we've already discussed him. Zeke at number 20. And this was one where I bounced around on Zeke as well. I know he didn't make your top 20. He's got a ton of carries. And it was kind of like, how far do you drop this guy for the workload and for how really bad he's been since Dak has been hurt, when he's still only 25 years old and he's really shown no signs of physically wearing down. I go back and forth on so often these running backs when they hit this threshold of whatever it is, 1,400 carries or something like that, their bodies just start to break down. Zeke hasn't shown that. And there's a few that seem to be immune to it. I guess specifically Adrian Peterson. Are you betting on Zeke being an Adrian Peterson type? I guess probably not, with you not having him in your top 20, huh?
I guess I'm a little more worried that he has sort of the productivity has really slowed down. Like he's not, I don't know. I guess we've always seen him in this like great system where he had the phenomenal offensive line in front of him. He had the very good quarterback. Now he's dealing with offensive line injuries. He's dealing with a backup quarterback, and we've just kind of seen him crash as far as his production. I'm not suggesting that he's just a pedestrian average type of back. Like Zeke is on talent alone. Yes. He's been great. He's handled this massive workload very capably without breaking down. We did have, I guess part of it is that I don't want to value him like he is still in the Jason Garrett system where Garrett just fed him and fed him and fed him. And we're already seeing Mike McCarthy work Tony Pollard into the Dallas offense more and more. And like there were kind of suggestions that was going to be the case based on the way, Mike McCarthy very rarely during his long run in Green Bay would just lean on one back super heavily. I mean, there was like one big Eddie Lacy year. But for the most part, it was always a multi-back approach. Now, obviously, Zeke is going to be top dog in any backfield, but, not to the extent that he was where Jason Garrett was just driving the value with this, crazy alpha workload usage. So I don't know, just the fact that the production has slowed down a little bit in less than ideal circumstances, the fact that he has logged all this mileage on the odometer, and the fact that he hasn't broken down yet doesn't mean he won't break down or at least slow down in the future. So, age and mileage definitely factors into this too.
Sure. And another factor, you've mentioned McCarthy, but he's totally inept. I mean, you look at what Aaron Rodgers has done with him gone. Man, I don't know how long he'll be in Dallas, but Jerry stuck with Jason Garrett for like 8 years too long?
Yes. safe to say that. And I mean, for that matter, DT, Mike McCarthy, we could probably do another show separately on Mike McCarthy's in-game decision making. But yeah, I don't think we want to get off track into that sort of a tangent.
Yeah. On topic though, it is a reason to potentially devalue Zeke here because you just you can't trust this offense at this point. So that was my top 20. I don't know if I'm going to end up moving anybody that wasn't in my top 20 in, but you had some guys that I'm definitely going to consider after seeing your rankings. I mean, these four guys that you had in your 11 to 20 that I did not make sense. The guy, I guess, that I'm most, well, there's a couple guys that I'm most intrigued by. So you have DeAndre Swift at number 12. You've got Antonio Gibson at number 13. You've got Terry McLaurin at 15 and DJ Moore at 16. So I guess the two that I am most, I would say, open to being sold on to moving into my top 20 are Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin. I think I'm a little bit warped on the Lions backfield from my Kerryon Johnson days. But it's, big positive to me that Patricia's out, even though Patricia was starting to, really lean on Swift here. So maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Some uncertainty with the coaching there. Hard to argue with the talent that we've seen from Swift in college. And now when he's gotten the opportunity in Detroit, I totally understand it. I had him pretty far down my list, to be honest.
Sure.
So I probably will end up moving him up based on – so I had him at 28. Yeah, probably a little bit low. This whole rookie running back class is kind of in flux to me. I'm not sure what to make of it. I know you and I both love Jonathan Taylor coming in. He was both of our number one. Some concerns there. I've still got him ranked number one out of this class, but definitely not as confident as I was. And then don't let me forget to ask you about James Robinson because I didn't see him anywhere near your top 20. I'm curious your take on him. But so let's talk about these four guys. First off, Swift, and let's go with the running backs first. Swift and Gibson.
So, Swift, I mean, I had him in this class number 2 behind Jonathan Taylor. So far, I mean, we've just seen not enough from Jonathan Taylor for us to feel like confident that he is going to be this dynasty cornerstone. I still believe in the talent. I saw too much of him at Wisconsin to think he is going to be a bust, but like there have been mistakes on film that he's not been picking up the NFL speed. I guess he's just making bad decisions, like the critical decision point of these runs where he's got to decide whether to cuts or hit the burst of speed or, try to run a guy over, try to elude him. Like too often he's making the wrong choice. And getting back to our discussion about Miles Sanders, I think we saw that out of Miles Sanders last year, and then it got better in the second half of the season. And I'm hoping it will get better for Jonathan Taylor. Like he was making the right run decisions, I think, against Green Bay the other day. And, then he got sidetracked by COVID for a week. So hopefully he can still finish with a flourish. But so far, I have not seen anything from DeAndre Swift to dissuade me from the opinion that he's really good. And I love his versatility, his run catch ability. Yes, like the landing spot in Detroit was such a bummer from the start, but you did love the fact that even early on when they were giving Adrian Peterson a lot of touches, Kerryon, sorry. looking at your fat head, and I can't get Kerryon out of my brain, that DeAndre was getting these high value touches, the work inside the 5 and 10 yard line, the receptions. And, now the fact that they did say, like, yes, we have to make this guy the featured guy. He is too good for us to, make a part-time committee guy, like really encouraging to me. So I'm kind of all in on him, and it doesn't hurt that he's 21 years old. I'm not going to lie. And then Antonio Gibson, you talk about the volatility of dynasty rankings. Like he probably would not have been in my top 20 before Thanksgiving Day, and maybe my opinion should not be that colored by a big day against a terrible Dallas defense. But and like I've talked about this, I can't recall who my guest was when we were talking about this on my podcast, but we were talking about how in the summer it seemed like Washington had all these running backs on the roster, and here's this uniquely talented guy with a very thin resume as far as a pure runner. But like, if he could just become Washington's third down back, get his foot in the door that way, and then maybe eventually start stealing early down carries from, let's see, Adrian Peterson, Bryce Love, Peyton Barber. Flash forward a couple of months, and you wouldn't have expected that, yes, Antonio Gibson would be the undisputed early down guy. Like, if you would have told us that, you would have been like, God, he's going to be a top 5 running back in his rookie year. No, that he's not the third down guy at all, that is J.D. McKissick. So I do think Antonio Gibson has like 3 down back capability. Like, he has shown us that profile. I mean, he is as big and as fast as Jonathan Taylor. And I think he's proven to be every bit as talented, if not more. And, maybe I'm leaning towards the more now that I've got him ranked ahead of Taylor. Plus the fact that, and I think this applies more to Terry McLaurin, who we'll talk about in a second, but obviously less than ideal circumstances in the Washington offense. And for both of these guys to be producing the way they are, in an Alex Smith quarterbacked offense, where Alex Smith was actually an improvement on what they had before. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, and Gibson is a guy that I was in on in the preseason. So many people cited his 33 college careers or whatever he had.
Right.
Like, there's no way
Very
this guy.
few.
Yeah, and there was a lot of haters out there, and I was in on Gibson, and I had him on my list here that I shared with you. Sneak peek behind the curtain for all the viewers and listeners out there. But I sent Pat a list of probably 40 names that were in consideration for my top 20. And Gibson, I did this before Thanksgiving. He was pretty far down the list. And when you sent yours over, I was like, man, Gibson is way too low. And I moved him up to like 29. And you said he probably wouldn't have been in your top 20 before Thanksgiving. I had this conversation with Beat on the Razzball Fantasy Football podcast yesterday, because I mentioned that Gibson would be in my top 10 the rest of the season, and he thought that was overreactive. But one game makes a huge difference when a guy has been building and building, and the consistency just keeps growing, and now he's getting 20 carries. Yeah, it was against a bad team, but it's what he's done the past 5 weeks that has added up to this. This is kind of the final straw that breaks the camel's back to me. And I'm with you. Maybe I bump him up even a little bit more in these rankings because, the offense, what he's done in a bad offense is pretty impressive. Swift, I love the hands, and, this is kind of my bias shining through on him, I think, against the Lions. Like I said, I got post-traumatic stress here on the Lions backfield. And Terry, on talent alone, he would be substantially higher on my list. The quarterback is the concern. Quarterback of the future, we just have no idea in Washington. And then the other thing that kind of knocked him down just a little bit in my rankings is that he's a little bit older than the guys from last year's class, the other guys. So he's going to be 26 next year. So that's just kind of what I was thinking there. But what's your sales pitch on Scary Terry and DJ Moore?
For Scary Terry, yes, he is a little bit older, but incredible athleticism, and mainly the fact that he has just completely balled out in like the most adverse possible ecosystem. One that can only really get better. I mean, this guy's had to deal with Dwayne Haskins and Brandon Allen, and when Alex Smith is like this quantum improvement in quarterback play, but like, you can just tell by the enormous target share he's had. He gets open against good cornerbacks all the time. Like, he isn't shut down by the top guys. Like, he's never a guy you'd consider sitting. So I only think the offense around him is going to get better. Yes, like the age is probably why I've got him, in the top 20 rather than top 10. But like, to me, the talent is just beyond dispute. And, I have to admit, I've been a little slow to come around on DJ Moore. Like, there are definitely some DJ Moore honks within the fantasy industry, as you well know. Like, a lot of people just absolutely love the guy. It took it's taken me a little bit of time to warm to him. And it certainly didn't help early in the season when like Robbie Anderson got out of the gate much faster than DJ Moore did. But, the more I watch him, I do think he is a pretty unique talent. He's still very young. Hopefully this, non-contact injury he sustained in week 12, if I knew that was some sort of ligament damage or whatever, I wouldn't have him in the top 20, but I'm hoping it's just something minor. So, he was going to be one of those guys who was either sort of in the back end of my top 20 or, just out. But the more I thought about it, I mean, I do like him as a growth stock at age 23, already with quite a bit of NFL experience under his belt. And, I do think he's going to be a wide receiver one for a long time.
That's a good point when you consider that Terry McLaurin is 25 and DJ Moore is still only 23, and he's been in the league 1 year longer.
Right.
Something to think about. Yeah, it sounds like I own both these guys actually, McLaurin and DJ Moore, in my main Dynasty league, and I was kind of freaking out when he went down with that non-contact injury. It sounded like it was probably an Achilles, but all reports are that it's some sort of ankle injury, and X-rays were negative. So. Yeah, I'm hoping, and I have never been a huge DJ Moore fan myself. As an owner, like I've always rooted for him. I came into him at a good price. I think I traded Aaron Jones for what was it? I think I traded Antonio Brown for Aaron Jones and DJ Moore a couple of years ago. That worked out really well. So the price was right at that time, and I've always just I've watched him, and I believe in the talent. It's just kind of a systemic thing, I guess, for the Panthers offense. Just concerns about the way Matt Rule has used him, the way Teddy has used him as well. But the talent, you're right, and the age, it's such a tricky thing to do with these rankings, valuing talent and youth versus this guy's actually doing it right now, and they're going to help your team win immediately kind of thing. So that's just my line of thinking there on DJ Moore. I love the player, don't love the situation. Hopefully he's okay. Last guy I did want to ask you about was James Robinson here before we wrap up. You didn't have him on your list because you did kind of a spillover list as I did, guys that maybe you kind of considered in this process. What's your thought process on James Robinson?
Yeah, I was dashing together the honorable mention list kind of quickly, after the cutoff point. And in hindsight, I absolutely would have had him on there. And in this startup dynasty draft we did over the summer, I got him, I think, with like my 27th round pick in a 28 round draft. So that is paid off. We have to throw away the draft capital at this point. I mean, this guy is just, he's doing it on a bad team. He's doing it with, the deck stacked against him all year. And then, just when you thought the situation couldn't get any more adverse, they put Mike Glennon in at quarterback, and he's still ripping off 127 rushing yards, over 150 yards from scrimmage. I don't know if most people could name the number 2 running back on Jacksonville right now. I guess it's either Devine Ozigbo or Dare Ogunbowale. Depending on how you want to look at it. But kind of doesn't matter because Robinson plays like 93% of the snaps there. And just the lack of pedigree, the fact that he's a UDFA. And major props, by the way, to Alex Dunlap of Roster Watch, who came on my podcast and was singing his praises in the spring and, putting me on to him for that dynasty draft. So thanks, Alex. I absolutely would have no reservations about taking him in third round of a dynasty startup.
Right. And I had him at 26. I mean, real consideration to put him in the top 20. He's probably, do you think he ends up being a back end first rounder next year?
Oh man. Yeah. He's going to be right around that turn. I think, maybe early second, one of these guys, maybe like Miles Sanders was this year, where he's kind of a borderline first round call.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Pat, awesome talking to you. I mean, great discussion. Lot to think about here. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And again, go back and check out the first part of this series. And Pat, you have a great December, a beautiful December morning here in Illinois. I hope you get some more December golf in.
Oh, let's hope so, DT. I'm going to push this season and milk the golf season for all it's worth. So
Me too.
fingers crossed on that weather, buddy.
I've
Great talking to you.
You too. Everybody go check out Pat on Twitter. It's at FitzFF.
Fitz_FF.
Fitz_FF on Twitter, and over at the Football Girl. And we'll catch you later, guys.